What is the most awkward or ridiculous situation that has happened to you in a public place? Story 1. One time, I rushed into a grocery store after work, totally exhausted and just trying to grab a carton of milk and some oranges. Nothing major, but I was in a hurry, and the line at checkout was massive. I waited for what felt like forever, and finally, it's my turn. Right then, my mom calls me. Not wanting to ignore her, I answer, and before I know it, my phone accidentally connects to the store's speaker system. Suddenly, my mom's voice is booming across the entire store, and she's talking about some family drama that definitely wasn't meant for everyone to hear. Everyone around me freezes, staring, some trying not to laugh, while others look totally annoyed. I start panicking, fumbling with my phone, trying to disconnect it, but for a good minute, there's no way to turn it off. People are snickering, the cashier's trying to keep a straight face, and I'm feeling like I want the floor to swallow me. When I finally manage to shut it off, the entire line gives me this slow clap, as if it was some kind of show I put on just for them. Story 2. So, I'm at this fancy restaurant with some friends, trying to impress everyone with how cultured I am. I order a dish I can't even pronounce, but it sounds good, so I go with it. When the waiter brings my plate, it's got one of those garnishes on top that looks super decorative, so I assume it's meant to be eaten. I dig in, trying to look like I know what I'm doing, but the thing tastes awful. Turns out it was purely decorative, and the chef was watching from the kitchen to see who'd be the first to eat it. One of my friends notices and whispers to me that I'm eating a garnish that's just for looks. The chef comes over, shaking his head, trying not to laugh, and he goes, "That's not part of the meal." My friends lose it, and the whole place turns to look. Let's just say my cultured act didn't hold up too well after that. Story 3. I went to a big work presentation once, dressed up in a new suit that I thought looked pretty sharp. I walk into the conference room, sit down, and start setting up my laptop. I notice people giving me weird looks, but I think they're just impressed by how prepared I am. The presentation starts, and halfway through, I realize my zipper is wide open. To make it worse, the shirt I'm wearing is bright red, so it's basically a flashing sign that I forgot to zip up. I try to casually zip it up without anyone noticing, but in the middle of me reaching down, my boss calls on me to answer a question. I freeze, my hand awkwardly halfway to my lap, and the whole room bursts into laughter. I finish the rest of the presentation trying to act like nothing happened. But let's just say I didn't live that down for a while. Edit. Guess I'm not the only one who's done the open zipper thing in public, judging by the comments. Story 4. A few years ago, I was at this amusement park with my family, and my little brother dared me to go on one of those huge roller coasters. I had no idea what I was getting myself into, but I didn't want to look scared, so I agreed. As soon as the coaster started, I realized I was way out of my comfort zone. The first drop hit, and I screamed so loud that the guy next to me lost his phone trying not to laugh at me. The worst part was, they took one of those on-ride photos just as I was mid-scream, face contorted in pure terror. My family bought the photo and made sure to show it to everyone we knew. For years, I couldn't go anywhere without someone bringing it up. The photo was practically legendary. Story 5. One time I was trying to impress this girl I liked by taking her to an art gallery. I wanted to look all sophisticated, so I acted like I knew all about modern art. At one point, I lean in close to a painting and start talking about how meaningful it is, only to realize it's a thermostat on the wall. I thought it was some abstract piece. The girl gives me this look, like she's trying not to laugh but can't help it. I was mortified, and every time I see a thermostat now, I remember that moment. Safe to say, we never went out again. Story 6. Once I was on a crowded bus, fully engrossed in a book, completely oblivious to my surroundings. I felt a gentle tap on my shoulder and looked up to see a little kid standing there, staring with a puzzled expression. He pointed at my lap and innocently asked, "Why do you have two books?" Confused, I glanced down, only to realize, to my horror, that my fly was open, and the little tag on my jeans was sticking out. I quickly zipped up, turning bright red as I tried to process what had just happened. The kid's mom, sitting nearby, was laughing, and the other passengers around us started chuckling as well, clearly amused by my embarrassment. To make things worse, the kid didn't stop there. He kept asking more questions, like, "Is that part of your outfit?" Or, "Why don't other people have that?" I could only sit there, sheepishly nodding and mumbling answers, wishing I could disappear. For the rest of the ride, I avoided eye contact, burying myself in my book, though it was impossible to focus. Even now, whenever I remember that moment, I feel my face heat up all over again. Edit. Yes, I check my fly every single time I leave the house now. Thanks for the constant reminders, everyone. Story 7. I once went to a wedding where I only knew the bride and didn't know anyone else. During the reception, I accidentally ended up in line for the bouquet toss. I didn't even realize it was happening until the bride called out to all the single ladies and everyone started cheering. Somehow, I got pushed to the front, right where the bouquet was headed. The bouquet literally lands in my hands and everyone starts chanting, "Next!" to me. I was so embarrassed. I just threw it back into the crowd and ran out. To this day, I can't go to a wedding without someone bringing up my famous bouquet catch. Story 8. Back in high school, I was hanging out with my friends at a skate park, trying to act like I was way cooler than I actually was. The place was packed, and feeling the pressure to impress, I decided to attempt a trick I'd never tried before: jumping off a ramp. I rolled up to the edge, took a deep breath, and launched myself off, hoping for an epic moment. Instead, I completely misjudged the landing, lost my balance mid-air, and face-planted right in front of everyone. For a few seconds, I just lay there, stunned and feeling like my soul had left my body. When I finally looked up, I saw my crush watching from the sidelines, her expression a mix of sympathy and barely contained amusement. Desperately trying to play it cool, I got up and pretended like it didn't hurt, even though my knees and ego were both bruised. My friends, of course, couldn't hold back their laughter and started calling me Air Ace, a nickname that stuck for weeks after my not-so-glorious stunt. As I limped home that day, I kept replaying the moment in my head, cringing at how badly it had gone. Even now, whenever I see a skate ramp, I can't help but feel a twinge of embarrassment mixed with the memory of my short-lived skateboarding career. Story 9. I was at a crowded coffee shop once and had just gotten my iced coffee. As I'm walking out, I see someone I know and wave, totally forgetting I'm holding my drink. Yep, iced coffee all over my face, my shirt, and the floor. The barista gives me a look that says, "This is why we can't have nice things." And I just stand there soaked, with everyone watching. I had to walk out covered in coffee, and my friend couldn't stop laughing. Lesson learned. Maybe keep both hands on the drink next time. Edit. For those asking, yes, I'm fine with hot coffee too. And no, I don't wave and hold drinks at the same time anymore. Story 10. One Halloween, I dressed up as a vampire and thought I looked pretty cool. I went all out with fake fangs, makeup, the whole deal. But at the party, I got thirsty, so I grabbed a can of soda and took a sip. I forgot I was wearing fangs, and they popped out right into my drink. I tried to fish them out, but they just sank to the bottom of the can. So, here I am. Vampire costume, no fangs, and everyone is asking where my teeth went. By the end of the night, my vampire look was just me with smeared makeup and no fangs. It's still one of my friends' favorite stories to bring up every Halloween. Story 11. I was at my friend's housewarming party and didn't know many people there, so I was trying to blend in. They had this fancy fruit punch with slices of fruit floating in it, and I thought, why not? I fill up a cup and start drinking, but something doesn't taste right. Turns out, I grabbed the candle jar instead of the punch. I'd just taken a big gulp of what I thought was fruity, but it was literally scented candle wax. I spent the rest of the night trying to explain that yes, I could taste the difference between a drink and a candle, but clearly not in the moment. Story 12. One day, I was walking my dog in the park, enjoying the quiet morning, when suddenly he started barking like crazy at a nearby bush. Thinking he must have spotted a squirrel or maybe a bird hiding in there, I walked over to check. But just as I got close, I heard a voice from within the bush say, "Excuse me." To my shock, there was an actual person crouched there, rummaging around. Apparently, they had lost their keys and decided that crawling through the bushes was the only way to find them. I tried to hold my dog back, but he was still barking his head off, completely convinced this was the most suspicious bush creature he'd ever encountered. The person gave me this half-amused, half-annoyed look, as if I was the strange one for disturbing their key hunt. I kept apologizing, trying to calm my dog down, but he wasn't having any of it. His eyes were locked on the bush as he barked furiously. Eventually, realizing I was just making things worse, I gave a quick, embarrassed wave and led my dog away. As we walked off, I could still hear the person muttering something as they continued their search, while my dog kept looking back, clearly unsatisfied that he'd had to leave his discovery behind. That walk definitely didn't go as planned. Story 13. One time I was at a library studying, and I'd brought this huge, noisy bag of chips with me. I tried to open it as quietly as possible, but of course, it makes the loudest crunching sound ever. Then, to make it worse, the bag bursts and chips go everywhere. The librarian walks over, dead silent, and just stares at the mess. I'm scrambling to pick everything up while everyone else in the library is trying not to laugh. Edit. Yes, I now bring library-friendly snacks that don't make a mess. Lesson learned. Story 14. At my cousin's wedding, they had a beautiful cake, and I thought it would be funny to pretend to cut a slice before the bride and groom. So, I reach for the cake as a joke, but accidentally stumble and press my hand right into it. Half of the cake gets smushed, and the bride is looking at me in shock. I try to fix it by smoothing it out with my hand, which just makes it worse. Needless to say, I'm never going to hear the end of it from my family. They call me Cake Crusher now. Story 15. I was meeting my new boss for lunch and wanted to make a good first impression. The restaurant was fancy, and they brought out a bowl of warm water with lemon. I'd never seen that before, so I assumed it was some fancy soup. I take a sip, and my boss just stares at me, horrified, and tells me it's for washing your hands. I had no idea what to say, so I just nodded and pretended like I knew that. By the end of the meal, I was still mortified, but at least my boss had a good laugh about it. Story 16. I went on a first date, and we decided to go ice skating, even though I'd never done it before. I thought it'd be cute to learn together, but instead, I ended up falling every 5 seconds. At one point, I tried to grab the wall for support, but ended up pulling down a bunch of decorations they'd set up around the rink. Security had to come over to clean up, and my date was just watching, laughing the whole time. Pretty sure there was no second date after that. Edit. Yes, I've since taken ice skating lessons. No more pulling down decorations. Story 17. One day at the gym, I decided to try out a machine I'd never used before, thinking it'd be a good way to switch up my routine. I loaded it up with what I thought were reasonable weights, feeling pretty confident as I adjusted my grip. But as soon as I started pulling, the weight swung back with way more force than I expected, nearly throwing me off balance. I let out an involuntary yelp as I struggled to regain control, but it was too late. The weights clanged loudly, and everyone around me turned to look. I tried to play it off, but the sight must have been too funny, because I could see a few people trying to hide their smirks. To make things worse, a trainer came over, trying to keep a straight face, and said, "Maybe start with lighter weights?" I nodded, too embarrassed to say anything, but at that point, my confidence was totally shot. I ended up abandoning my workout and slinking out of the gym, hoping no one would remember the machine fail incident. Now, every time I pass that machine, I give it a wide berth, refusing to go near it again. Story 18. I was at a company holiday party, and they were giving out awards for best dressed. They call my name, and I'm so surprised that I jump up to accept it. As I stand up, I realize I'd accidentally knocked my chair over, which then knocks over a whole row of chairs behind me like dominoes. Everyone's clapping and laughing, and I just have to stand there in my best-dressed outfit, looking like the most clumsy person in the room. Edit. I've accepted that I am just that person at every party. Story 19. I once went on a road trip with some friends, and we stopped at a gas station in the middle of nowhere. I get out to stretch my legs and decide to take a quick selfie with the scenic view. Right as I snap the picture, I realize I'm actually leaning on someone's car, and they're watching me from inside, looking really confused. I had no idea, and just quickly apologized and walked away like it was totally normal. The worst part? When I looked at the photo later, you can see their shocked face perfectly in the background. Story 20. I was at the airport, trying to look cool as I got through security quickly. I put all my things on the conveyor belt, but when I walked through the metal detector, it beeped loudly. I didn't realize I'd left my belt on, so I had to go back and take it off. Then, as I was putting it back on, my pants nearly slipped down. The security guard was trying to hold back a laugh, and so were the people in line behind me. Let's just say, I made it through security, but my ego did not. Edit. I triple-check for metal objects every time now. Thanks, TSA. Story 21. One day while shopping, I spotted this amazing jacket on what I thought was a mannequin standing near the entrance of a store. It was exactly my style. The color, the cut, everything. So I walked over, admiring it up close. Wanting to get a feel for the fabric, I reached out and gently touched the sleeve. But instead of the still lifeless arm of a mannequin, I felt a slight movement. I froze as I realized that the mannequin was actually a real person who had been standing incredibly still, probably browsing his phone. He turned to look at me, completely bewildered, and said, "Can I help you?" Mortified, I quickly mumbled something that might have been an apology, though I was too embarrassed to remember my exact words. Without waiting for him to react, I spun around and practically sprinted out of the section, trying to disappear before he or anyone else saw my face. My heart was racing, and all I could think about was how ridiculous I must have looked, petting some random guy's jacket. Now, whenever I'm in a store, I make absolutely sure to double-check before I reach out to touch anything, just in case it comes to life again. Story 22. During a college lecture, I was sitting near the front, trying to focus. Suddenly, I felt a sneeze coming on, but I was holding a big coffee cup in both hands. I sneezed so hard that I spilled coffee all over myself and the desk. The professor stopped mid-sentence and asked if I was okay, while everyone else tried to stifle their laughter. I sat there, drenched in coffee, nodding and pretending everything was fine. The worst part was, I had to sit like that for the rest of the class, smelling like a coffee shop. Story 23. I went on a blind date, and we agreed to meet at this coffee shop. I saw someone who looked like my date, so I confidently walked up, said hey, and sat down. We talked for about 10 minutes before I realized I was with the wrong person. They were too polite to say anything, so we both just sat there, completely confused, until I finally checked my phone and saw my real date messaging me from across the room. I had to awkwardly excuse myself and join my actual date, who was just as confused by the whole situation. Edit. Moral of the story. Always confirm before sitting down. Story 24. I was at a packed baseball game with some friends, enjoying the atmosphere when they dared me to try catching a foul ball if one came our way. Now, I'm definitely not known for my athletic skills, but not wanting to back down, I agreed, figuring the chances were slim anyway. Of course, later in the game, a foul ball came flying straight toward us. I stood up, stretched out my hand and braced for the catch. But instead of landing in my glove, the ball went just a bit too high and smacked me right on the forehead. I felt the impact, and for a split second, everything went quiet as the crowd collectively gasped. Thankfully, I was fine, but as soon as everyone realized I was okay, the entire crowd, my friends included, erupted into laughter. My friends couldn't stop teasing me about being the only person to catch a ball with their face. Even the people around us were giving me thumbs up and asking if I was all right, chuckling the whole time. Now, whenever we go to a game, my friends bring it up, joking that I should keep my face mitt ready in case another ball comes my way. Story 25. I was babysitting my little cousin, and she insisted on playing hide and seek. She ran to hide, and I started looking for her. After a few minutes, I heard a noise coming from the closet, so I opened the door and shouted, "Found you!" But it turned out to be my cousin's mom's cat, who got so scared it bolted out, knocking over a stack of boxes in the process. My cousin hears the noise and runs over, and we both end up cleaning up the mess together. To this day, I'm convinced that Kat was out for revenge. Story 26. One time, I was at a friend's barbecue and didn't know many people there. They had this big cooler with drinks, so I reach in and grab what I thought was a lemonade. I take a huge gulp, only to realize it's actually a spiked lemonade, and I've just downed half of someone's drink by mistake. The owner of the drink was standing right behind me, looking a mix of amused and annoyed. I just handed it back and mumbled, "Sorry, it looked refreshing." Now I always double-check before I grab any drink at a party. Story 27. I decided to take a dance class to try something new. I'm not exactly coordinated, but I thought it'd be fun. As we're learning a routine, the instructor asks us to do a big jump. I tried my best but lost my balance, tripped, and accidentally took down 2 other people with me. We all ended up in a tangled mess on the floor, laughing so hard we couldn't get up. They still joke about me being the tornado every time I show up for class. Edit. Safe to say, I stay clear of moves that involve jumping now. Story 28. At a job interview once, I was trying to sound super professional. The interviewer asked what my hobbies were, and for some reason, my brain just blanked. I ended up saying, "I like to think a lot." They looked at me, clearly confused, so I added, "About, life and stuff." I could feel my face turning red, and the rest of the interview was so awkward. Needless to say, I didn't get the job, but I did get a lot of laughs telling my friends about it. Story 29. I was in line at a concert, buzzing with excitement to see my favorite band live. The crowd was huge, and while scanning the sea of people, I thought I spotted my friend in the distance. Without thinking twice, I started waving like a maniac, calling out their name to get their attention. The person turned around, and my heart sank as I realized it wasn't my friend at all. Just a stranger who happened to look vaguely similar. They hesitated, giving me a polite but clearly confused wave back, while I stood there frozen in embarrassment. To make it worse, everyone around me, including my actual friends, had witnessed the whole thing and burst into laughter. I could feel my face turning red as they teased me, and I tried to laugh it off, wishing I could disappear into the crowd. For the rest of the concert, they kept joking about my enthusiastic greeting to random strangers. Now, I've learned to double-check before throwing out any big waves or shouts, just to avoid another mix-up. Story 30. Once, I was at a bookstore and found a book I'd been wanting to read. I sat down in a cozy corner, got totally absorbed, and started reading for hours. When I finished, I got up and went to the counter, only to realize I'd left my wallet at home. I had to awkwardly explain to the cashier that I'd just spent all that time reading and couldn't even buy the book. They were nice about it, but I was mortified. Edit. Don't worry, I went back and bought the book later. Lesson learned. Story 31. I was on a crowded subway during rush hour, barely awake, and leaning against one of the poles. Just as I start to zone out, the train jerks to a sudden stop, and I completely lose my balance. I fall forward, landing right in the lap of the guy sitting next to me. As if that wasn't bad enough, I had a massive backpack on, and as I tried to get up, it knocked his coffee cup right out of his hands and onto the floor. I felt everyone's eyes on me, and I just mumbled, "Sorry," about 100 times, while he looked at me like he was deciding whether to laugh or be angry. The guy gave me a tired sigh and then started wiping coffee off his pants. I could feel the judgment from every single person on that subway car, and all I wanted was for the next stop to come so I could escape. By the time I finally got up, my face was bright red, and I could tell people were stifling laughs. To this day, I'm known among my friends as the person who broke the morning commute. Story 32. A few years ago, I went with my niece to a petting zoo, thinking it'd be fun to play the cool uncle role. We were feeding the animals, and she dared me to pet one of the goats. So I walk up confidently, give it a nice pat, and the goat seems perfectly friendly, until it wasn't. Out of nowhere, it headbutts me, knocking me straight into a pile of hay. My niece, of course, thinks this is the funniest thing ever and bursts out laughing, while all the kids around start pointing and laughing too. I try to play it cool, brushing hay out of my hair, but I was definitely not the cool uncle anymore. Every time I visit now, my niece asks if I want to visit my friend, the goat. Safe to say, I'm keeping my distance from petting zoos for a while. Story 33. In my first yoga class, I was determined to make a good impression and show I was in shape. The instructor had us try this difficult balancing pose, and I was really struggling, but I thought I could manage. Right as I'm feeling somewhat stable, I lose my balance completely, topple over, and land right on someone else's water bottle. The bottle explodes, spraying water all over both of us and our mats. The instructor tried to hide a smile and just handed me a towel, while everyone else pretended not to notice. The worst part was I had to finish the class with a soaked mat and water, all over my clothes. Every time I went back, I swear people remembered me as the water bottle crusher. Lesson learned. Stick to the beginner poses until you actually know what you're doing. Story 34. One summer, my friends and I went camping, but since we arrived late, we had to set up our tents in the dark. I strapped on a headlamp, determined to be helpful and get everything set up as quickly as possible. Focused on the gear, I didn't realize that there was a tree right behind me. As I backed up, I smacked right into it, and the headlamp on my forehead lit up my face in perfect timing, capturing my stunned expression for everyone to see. My friends, seeing the whole scene play out, burst into laughter at my dramatic stumble, while I tried to regain my balance and my pride. For the rest of the trip, I was stuck with the nickname Headlamp Hero. Every time we needed light or had a task, someone would jokingly ask if the hero needed assistance. I couldn't escape the endless teasing, and even now, whenever I see a headlamp, I'm instantly reminded of that night and my shining, quite literally, moment. And yes, I've since learned to double-check my surroundings before trying to act like a pro in the dark. Story 35. At my cousin's graduation, I was trying to get the perfect photo as she crossed the stage. I held my phone high, ready to capture the moment. But in my excitement, I didn't see the slippery patch of grass in front of me. I took one step forward and immediately lost my footing, falling backward into a mud puddle. My phone flew out of my hand and landed somewhere behind me, while everyone around gasped and then burst into laughter when they saw I was okay. When I looked at the photo later, all I'd managed to capture was a blurry shot of the ceiling as I fell. My cousin said it was the best live-action photo of the day, and she still shows it to people whenever she needs a laugh. Story 36. One sunny afternoon, my friends and I decided to play frisbee at the beach. I was feeling pretty confident and wanted to impress everyone with a powerful high throw. I positioned myself, aimed carefully, and launched the frisbee with all my might. But instead of gliding gracefully over to my friends, it sailed in a completely different direction, curving through the air and heading straight for an unsuspecting family having a peaceful picnic nearby. The frisbee came down with a vengeance, knocking into their carefully arranged setup. Sandwiches, snacks, and even a few drinks scattered in every direction. And for a moment, the family just sat there, too stunned to react. Realizing what I'd done, I sprinted over, mortified, apologizing profusely as I tried to help them gather their things. They gave me polite but clearly unimpressed looks as I scrambled to pick up what I could, muttering apologies the entire time. Meanwhile, my friends were doubled over with laughter, watching the whole scene unfold from a distance. For the rest of the day, they didn't let me forget it, calling me the picnic destroyer every chance they got. Now, every time someone brings up frisbee, I get a few teasing glances from my friends, as if they're wondering if I'll target another unsuspecting family's lunch. Story 37. At a friend's house, I was meeting her family for the first time. Her little sister asked if I wanted to help bake cookies, and I thought, why not? She hands me a bag of flour, and just as I start to pour, I feel a sneeze coming on. Before I can stop myself, I sneeze right into the flour, which explodes everywhere, all over the counter, the floor, and both of us. Her mom walked in just in time to see the chaos, and I'm standing there covered in flour, trying to apologize. My friend's family thought it was hilarious, but they still call me Cookie Monster every time I visit. I'm not sure if I'll ever live that one down. Edit. Yes, I'm now very careful when baking around others. And no, I haven't sneezed into flour again. Yet. Story 38. I was at a museum, totally absorbed in reading the description of an exhibit, when I started leaning on a rope barrier, without even realizing it. Suddenly, the barrier tipped over with a loud clang, and I stumbled forward, almost colliding with the exhibit. Alarms went off, and everyone in the room turned to look. A security guard rushed over, gave me a disappointed look, and started resetting the barrier, while I apologized 100 times. I quickly left the room, but not before noticing people giving me amused glances for the rest of my visit. Apparently, I made the museum experience more memorable for everyone else. Story 39. On a long road trip with friends, we stopped at a gas station, and I bought a massive slushie to keep me cool. As soon as I got back in the car, I tried setting it down, but it slipped out of my hand, exploded, and splashed all over me, the seat, and even the steering wheel. For the rest of the drive, I was sticky and stained bright red, while my friends tried their best not to laugh every time I complained. It took ages to clean the car, and we kept finding little spots of dried slushy for weeks afterward. Needless to say, I'm a lot more careful with my drinks on road trips now. Story 40. I volunteered at a school event, excited to help out and assigned to hand out programs at the entrance. Determined to make a friendly first impression, I greeted each guest with a big smile, passing out programs one by one. But as I handed a program to one person, I accidentally gave them a second one without realizing. They looked down at the double stack, raised an eyebrow, and chuckled, "Thanks, I'll read both." Caught off guard, I laughed along and apologized, brushing it off as a simple mistake. However, as the line grew, I kept slipping up, giving out 2 programs to random people without meaning to. Each time, I tried to recover smoothly, but it wasn't long before the small crowd began to notice my habit. Soon enough, it became a running joke, and people started asking me for extras with amused grins, teasing me about my generous program handouts. By the end of the event, I'd fully embraced the role of the double program person, and people would pass by, giving me exaggerated thanks and holding up their 2 programs with a wink. While I did my best to laugh it off, I could tell this would be one of those little moments everyone remembered. In fact, I'm pretty sure some of them will remember the extra program volunteer far longer than the event itself. Story 41. I was at a karaoke night with friends, and everyone was hyping me up to sing a song. I decided to go for a power ballad, thinking I'd surprise them with my hidden singing skills. Halfway through the song, I hit a high note and completely missed it. My voice cracked so badly it sounded more like a squeak. The crowd fell silent for a second, then erupted in laughter, and my friends were practically in tears from laughing so hard. I spent the rest of the night trying to live down the legendary high note fail. Every time I go to karaoke now, someone brings it up and begs me to sing it again. Story 42. One time at a family reunion, we decided to play charades. I got really into it, acting out what was supposed to be a monkey. I was hopping around and making what I thought were monkey noises, but my aunt, who didn't hear what I was supposed to be, thought I was trying to act like an angry cat. She yelled, "It's a wild cat!" and everyone burst out laughing. I kept trying, but every guess got further from monkey. I finally gave up when someone guessed giraffe. Now my family jokes that I'm the world's worst monkey. Story 43. I was in line at a fast food place, chatting with a friend, when my turn came up to order. I was so deep in conversation that I accidentally ordered exactly what my friend was talking about, a kid's meal. I didn't realize my mistake until I got my tray and saw the tiny burger, fries, and apple juice. The cashier just gave me this amused smile and didn't say a word. My friend, of course, couldn't stop laughing at my special order. Now every time we go out, my friend jokes that I should get the kids' menu to save a little money. Edit. Yep, I went back to the counter and ordered an adult meal. But I did keep the apple juice. Story 44. I was walking through a peaceful park one afternoon, fully absorbed in the music playing through my headphones. Suddenly, out of the corner of my eye, I spotted a squirrel standing completely still in the middle of the path. Something about its frozen pose caught my attention, and I thought it was my chance to have a moment with nature. Without even pausing to think, I crouched down and stretched out my hand toward the squirrel, hoping it might be curious enough to approach me. I stayed there, hand extended, waiting for it to move. But after a few long seconds, I realized that it was completely motionless. Not because it was mesmerized by me, but because it was actually a tiny statue, probably put there as a park decoration. Just as I was processing this embarrassing revelation, I noticed a few people walking by, observing my attempt to connect with the stone squirrel. They exchanged glances, and then one of them started laughing, which set the rest off. Caught red-handed, I tried to play it off by smiling and acting as if I'd known it was a statue the whole time. But inside, I was cringing, feeling my face turn red as I stood up, brushing off the dirt from crouching. Now, every time I spot a squirrel in a park, I can't help but remember that little bonding attempt and feel a wave of embarrassment all over again. Story 45. At a party, someone brought out a piñata, and they picked me to go first. I was blindfolded and given a bat, and as I went to swing, I misjudged my distance and completely missed, losing my balance. I fell forward, and my friend, trying to be helpful, reached out to catch me but ended up tripping too. We both ended up in a heap on the ground while everyone else was laughing. By the time we got up, the piñata was still untouched, and they let someone else take over. I'm now known as Piñata Miss among my friends. Story 46. In college, I joined a big study group to prep for a final. I thought it would be a good way to stay focused, but I ended up dozing off halfway through. Next thing I know, I wake up to everyone staring at me, because apparently I'd started sleep-talking about completely unrelated things. Someone told me I mumbled about pizza and superheroes. I tried to laugh it off, but it was hard to recover from that one. They kept asking if I had any interesting dreams every time we studied after that. Story 47. I was waiting at the airport, exhausted and completely zoned out, just scrolling on my phone to pass the time. When I heard the boarding call over the speakers, I automatically stood up, grabbed my bag, and headed straight to the gate without even glancing at my boarding pass. I made my way onto the plane, found what I thought was my seat, and settled in, finally ready to relax. A few minutes later, a man walked over, looking a bit confused, and said, "Excuse me, I think you're in my seat." I glanced up, ready to correct him, but then I looked around and realized that something felt off. I checked my boarding pass and suddenly it hit me. I was on the wrong plane. I had boarded a completely different flight, just waltzing on without a second thought. Embarrassed beyond belief, I apologized and quickly gathered my things. The flight attendant, who was clearly amused, came over and politely escorted me back up the aisle. The entire plane seemed to be watching my walk of shame as I awkwardly made my way off, and I could hear a few chuckles and see some sympathetic smiles from the other passengers. I walked back through the terminal, trying to shake off the embarrassment, but that experience left a mark. Now, every time I fly, I triple-check my boarding pass, my gate, and the plane itself to make sure I'm not accidentally heading off to a random destination again. Story 48. At a holiday work party, they had a secret Santa exchange, and I was feeling pretty confident about my gift. When it was my turn to give, I handed over the wrapped box and felt really good about it, until my coworker opened it and just stared in confusion. I'd accidentally given him my own gift, a coffee mug with my initials on it. Everyone started laughing, and I had to explain that my real gift was back at my desk. Ever since then, my coworkers tease me about my self-gifting Secret Santa moment. Edit. Yes, I double-check my presents now. And no, I don't keep my initials on the gift. Story 49. During a college orientation, they had an icebreaker where everyone was supposed to introduce themselves with a fun fact. I blanked, and in a panic, said that I could wiggle my ears. Of course, they asked me to show them. When I tried, it didn't work, and everyone just stared, waiting. I kept struggling to make my ears move, but nothing happened. Eventually, someone kindly said, "It's okay, we believe you." But the damage was done. Every time I saw someone from that group afterward, they'd ask if I'd been practicing. Story 50. I was at a charity walk with a big crowd, and they handed out free t-shirts at the start. Everyone quickly swapped into their shirts, so I did too, without looking closely. I was halfway through the walk when someone pointed out that I'd accidentally put my shirt on inside out. The whole time I was proudly wearing the tag and seams on the outside. I had to stop, take it off, and turn it the right way while everyone laughed. The organizers even joked that they'd start printing their logos on both sides of the shirts, just for me. Story 51. One day at the gym, I was feeling pretty confident and decided it was time to try something new. The rowing machine. I'd seen others use it with such ease, so I figured it couldn't be that hard. I sat down, adjusted the foot straps, gripped the handles, and prepared to row my way into fitness glory. I started off slowly, getting a feel for the motion, but as I grew more confident, I decided to go all in, pulling back with all my strength. Just as I was finding a rhythm, I pulled a bit too hard. The seat, which was supposed to glide smoothly, shot backward faster than I expected, and before I knew it, I'd lost control. The seat slid right out from under me, and I ended up sprawled flat on the floor, still clutching the handles with a shocked expression on my face. Every head in the gym turned in my direction, and I could feel all eyes on me as I tried to gather myself. A trainer rushed over, his face a mix of concern and barely concealed amusement, asking if I was okay. Embarrassed, I mumbled that I was fine and tried to laugh it off, but I could tell he was holding back laughter as he helped me up. My confidence completely shattered. I decided to cut my workout short and slinked out of the gym, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Since that day, I've steered clear of the rowing machine, haunted by the memory of my epic tumble. Now, just the sight of it brings back that cringe-worthy moment all over again. Story 52. During a family game night, we were playing charades, and I got assigned Dolphin. I went all out, flopping around and making squeaky noises, thinking I was doing great. My family, however, was completely lost and kept guessing everything but Dolphin. Finally, after they guessed Sick Bird and Broken Seal, I gave up and told them the answer. Now, every time we play charades, they joke that I should stick to land animals. I still cringe when I think about my dolphin impression. Story 53. I was at a friend's wedding, and they had one of those fancy photo booths with props. I grabbed a wig, huge sunglasses, and a feather boa, totally going for the over-the-top look. Right as I'm striking a pose, I hear laughter behind me and realize I've photobombed the bride and groom's group photo. They're all dressed beautifully, and I'm in the back looking ridiculous in a bright pink wig. The worst part? They kept the photo, and now it's in their wedding album for everyone to see. Edit. They say it's their favorite photo, but I'm still not convinced. Story 54. Once I was giving a presentation in class and thought I'd be clever by using a little remote clicker to control my slides. Right as I'm getting to the main point, I press the button, and nothing happens. I keep pressing, getting a bit frantic, but the slides stay frozen. Then I realize I'd grabbed my TV remote by mistake. My classmates are trying to hide their laughter while I try to play it off, but my face was bright red the whole time. Now I double-check my bag before any presentation to make sure I have the right remote. Story 55. At my cousin's birthday party, the whole family gathered around as they brought out a beautiful, big cake covered in candles. We all started singing Happy Birthday, and the room filled with cheerful voices and laughter. As the song came to an end, I leaned in to give my cousin a hug, but I didn't realize just how close I was to the cake. In one quick, unintentional sweep, my sleeve brushed over the cake, knocking one of the candles off. The candle bounced onto the tablecloth, and within seconds, we noticed a tiny wisp of smoke as the cloth began to smolder. Chaos broke out as everyone jumped up, frantically patting at the smoldering spot to make sure it didn't turn into a full flame. Thankfully, we managed to put it out before anything serious happened, but the moment had already stolen the spotlight. For the rest of the party, I felt like the designated party hazard, with my cousin jokingly warning me to keep my distance from anything flammable. Every time someone mentioned the cake, they'd look at me and laugh, reminding me of my accidental candle incident. My cousin even teased that I'd tried to sabotage his big day, turning my little mishap into the running joke of the afternoon. Now, at every family gathering, they make a point of seating me far from the cake, candles, or anything remotely delicate, just to be safe. To this day, I still get the occasional reminder about candle safety whenever it's time to celebrate. Story 56. I was at an art museum with a date, trying to impress her with my art knowledge. We're looking at a big abstract painting, and I start going on about how it represents the struggle of modern society. She's nodding politely, and just then, a museum guide walks by and tells us, "That's actually a piece of the ventilation system being repaired." My date bursts out laughing, and I just have to stand there, totally embarrassed, trying to play it off. Safe to say, my art expert days ended there. Story 57. During a beach trip, I decided to try my hand at surfing for the first time. I managed to stand up for all of 2 seconds before a big wave knocked me off the board. But instead of gracefully falling into the water, I somehow ended up face first in the sand, right in front of a group of kids building sandcastles. They thought it was hilarious, and one kid even asked if I meant to do that. Now my friends call me the sand surfer. Story 58. I was in a crowded elevator heading to the top floor of a hotel. Right as it gets packed with people, I feel a sneeze coming on. I try to hold it in, but end up sneezing so loudly that everyone jumps. To make it worse, I accidentally spit a little while sneezing, and the person right in front of me visibly cringes. I spent the rest of the ride with my head down, avoiding eye contact, while everyone else in the elevator seemed to take one small step back. Every time I ride an elevator now, I feel a little self-conscious about sneezing. Story 59. At a baseball game, I was lucky enough to snag a seat right in the front row, and I was beyond excited. I'd always dreamed of catching a foul ball, and I knew this was my chance. As the game went on, I kept my eyes peeled, ready for that moment to shine. Then, finally, a foul ball came soaring straight toward me. Heart racing, I stood up, arms stretched out, fully prepared for the catch of a lifetime. But instead of landing gracefully in my hands, the ball veered just slightly, missing my glove and smacking me square on the forehead. For a split second, the entire crowd went silent, processing what had just happened. Then, as I blinked in shock, the entire stadium burst into laughter, with people clapping and cheering as I tried to laugh off the pain and embarrassment. To make matters even worse, the camera crew had captured my big moment, and they decided to replay the entire thing on the big screen, complete with slow motion. I watched, cringing, as my dramatic miss and impact played out for the whole stadium, with each replay zooming in just a little more on my bewildered expression as the ball hit me. My friends were in hysterics, and even strangers were coming up to pat me on the back, calling me the star of the game. Now, whenever we go to a game, my friends insist on keeping me far from any foul ball territory, joking that I've had my 15 minutes of fame already. Let's just say my dreams of catching a foul ball have taken a backseat to avoiding them entirely. Story 60. I was at a neighborhood Halloween party, dressed as a zombie. They had a big costume contest, and when they called my name, I was so excited I tripped going up the stairs. I tried to play it off like I was in character, staggering and groaning, but my face was bright red from embarrassment. The crowd thought it was all part of the act and gave me extra applause, but my friends knew the truth and still tease me about it. To this day, they call me Zombie Tripper every Halloween. Story 61. I was volunteering at a food festival, handing out samples at one of the stands. Everything was going well until I bent down to grab more samples and accidentally bumped the table. The entire display of sauces and dips started wobbling, and before I knew it, the whole thing collapsed. Sauces spilled everywhere. On the table, on the floor, and of course, all over me. I stood there, covered in salsa and guacamole, while festival-goers tried not to laugh. One of the chefs came over, sighing as he helped me clean up, and I could tell he wasn't thrilled. I spent the rest of the day smelling like a burrito, and every time someone passed our stand, they'd give me a sympathetic smile. I'm pretty sure they still remember me as the salsa disaster at that festival. Story 62. It was a big day at the office. My turn to lead a presentation in front of the whole team, including my boss. Determined to project confidence and make a strong impression, I stood tall at the podium. gripping my notes and ready to go. As I began my introduction, I gestured enthusiastically with my hands, trying to add a bit of flair. Unfortunately, I hadn't noticed my water bottle teetering on the edge of the podium. With one sweeping gesture, I sent the bottle flying off, and it hit the floor with a deafening thud, water spilling everywhere. The splash drenched not only the podium, but also soaked my carefully organized notes. Flustered, I tried to continue, but my notes were now smeared and practically unreadable, and I could barely hold my place, fumbling with each sentence. By the time I wrapped up, I could see my colleagues stifling smiles, trying their hardest not to laugh. My boss gave me a look that was both amused and sympathetic, clearly entertained by my unplanned water show. Just when I thought I'd survived the worst, I went to step away from the podium, only to accidentally knock over the microphone, which fell with another loud bang. The room erupted into laughter, and I could feel my face turning red as I quickly gathered my things and made my way out, drenched and humiliated. From that day on, my co-workers jokingly started calling me the Splash, reminding me of my not-so-graceful presentation every chance they got. Safe to say, I now keep my water bottle far away whenever it's my turn to speak. Story 63. At a wedding, I was sitting with my family during the reception, and they served this fancy soup. I'd never seen anything like it, and thought the little lemon wedge on the side was part of the soup itself. I squeezed it all in and stirred it up, only to realize that it was supposed to be a garnish. The soup tasted incredibly sour, and I was too embarrassed to admit my mistake, so I forced myself to finish the whole bowl. Afterward, my family kept asking why I looked so uncomfortable. When I finally told them what happened, they couldn't stop laughing, and now every time there's soup on the table, someone asks if I want a double dose of lemon. Story 64. I was in a coffee shop, deeply engrossed in my laptop, working on a project. When my order was ready, I absent-mindedly grabbed my cup, not realizing it was someone else's drink. I took a big sip, only to taste something completely different from my usual coffee. I looked up, horrified, and saw the rightful owner of the drink standing in line, staring at me with an amused smile. I quickly apologized and handed it back, but the barista ended up making him a new one. The rest of the time I was there, I kept seeing people glance over, probably wondering if I was planning to steal another drink. Story 65. One day at the gym, I decided to hop on the treadmill for a quick warm-up before hitting the weights. Feeling confident, I set the speed a little higher than usual, thinking it would give me a good challenge. As the treadmill started picking up pace, I figured I could handle it and pushed myself to keep up. But about a minute in, I realized I'd misjudged my abilities. My footing slipped, and before I knew it, the treadmill belt shot me backward like a catapult, launching me straight off and onto the gym floor with a loud, echoing thud. I lay there for a second, staring up at the ceiling, trying to process what had just happened. The noise had drawn the attention of nearly everyone nearby, and I could feel dozens of eyes on me. One guy came over, clearly trying to hold back laughter, and asked with a smirk, "You okay?" Embarrassed beyond belief, I forced a laugh, nodded, and picked myself up, trying to act like it was no big deal, even though my face was burning. For the rest of my workout, I avoided the treadmill area entirely, feeling the lingering embarrassment every time I passed by. Now, whenever I step onto a treadmill, I start at the absolute slowest speed possible, triple-checking my footing before I even consider increasing the pace. That treadmill launch is a memory I'll never forget, and definitely never want to repeat. Story 66. At a costume party, I went as a knight, complete with a plastic sword and armor. I thought I looked pretty cool until I accidentally whacked someone with my sword while trying to show off. The sword snapped in half, leaving me holding just the handle, and everyone around me burst out laughing. I tried to play it off, but it was hard to look like a cool knight while holding half a plastic sword. For the rest of the night, everyone kept joking about the clumsy knight, and even the host asked if I needed a backup sword, just to keep me out of trouble. Story 67. During a holiday dinner with my family, I was helping serve dessert and tried to carry a whole tray of pies to the table. I took one step and the tray tilted, sending one of the pies flying off. It hit the floor with a splat, and everyone gasped. My grandma looked at me with a mix of horror and amusement as I stood there with pie all over my shoes. Every holiday since, my family jokingly assigns me pie duty and hands me only one piece at a time to make sure I don't cause another pie disaster. Story 68. One time I went to the theater with a friend to watch a new movie, and we sat through what we thought were the previews. 10 minutes in, I realized we'd walked into the wrong screening and we were watching a totally different film. I leaned over and told my friend, but she insisted we stay and watch just to see what happens. We ended up watching the whole movie, laughing the whole way through. Now, whenever we make plans, she jokes that I'm her surprise movie buddy, since I apparently like mixing up our entertainment. Story 69. I was on a first date at a trendy sushi restaurant, determined to make a good impression and show off my adventurous side. When the menu came, I went all out, ordering one of the most exotic rolls they had, hoping it would make me look bold and sophisticated. When the plate arrived, it looked beautiful, topped with vibrant slices of what I assumed were avocado. Without thinking twice, I picked up a large piece, dipped it generously in soy sauce, and popped it in my mouth. It took only a split second for me to realize that I hadn't bitten into avocado at all, but a massive chunk of wasabi. Instantly, my mouth felt like it was on fire, and my sinuses exploded. I could feel my face heating up as the intensity hit, but I tried to stay composed, fighting back the urge to gasp or spit it out. As I sat there trying to keep it together, tears began streaming down my face uncontrollably, and I could feel my nose start to run. My date looked at me with growing concern, asking if I was all right, while I attempted to casually wave it off between gulps of water. I must have drained 3 glasses, trying to douse the fire in my mouth, but the heat wouldn't subside. The whole ordeal left me embarrassed, red-faced, and a little too watery-eyed for comfort. Needless to say, the smooth impression I'd hoped to make was pretty much ruined, and my date seemed more amused than impressed. Now, every time I go to a sushi place, I'm extra cautious around anything green, making absolutely sure to double-check before diving in. For Story 70. I was waiting in line for a concert, feeling excited and a bit impatient. When I finally got to the entrance, I confidently handed over my ticket, but the security guard gave me a strange look. I'd accidentally handed him my grocery receipt instead of the ticket. He just stared at me while I scrambled to find the actual ticket in my bag. By then, everyone around me was chuckling, and my friend was shaking his head, clearly amused. Every time we go to a concert now, he jokes, "Got your ticket, or should I hold on to it this time?" Story 71. I was at an office holiday party, and they had a chocolate fountain with all sorts of fruits and treats for dipping. I was feeling pretty fancy, and decided to go for a big marshmallow dunk. But as I pulled it out, I misjudged the angle, and chocolate flew everywhere. It landed on my shirt, my shoes, and even on my boss's dress shirt. The whole room went quiet, and my boss just looked down at his chocolate-streaked shirt, raising an eyebrow. I tried to apologize and grab napkins to help clean up, but I just ended up making it worse. For the rest of the night, everyone teased me about my chocolate surprise and joked about keeping me far from the dessert table next year. Story 72. Once, at a family picnic, I thought it'd be fun to take on my younger cousins in a game of tug-of-war. We split into 2 teams, and I was determined to impress them by winning. Right as we were getting into it, my team gave one big pull, and I lost my footing completely, falling straight onto my back. Of course, my cousins thought this was hilarious, and they all piled on top of me, cheering for their victory. To make it worse, someone captured the whole thing on video, and now every family gathering includes someone asking, "Ready for a rematch?" Needless to say, I avoid tug-of-war at all costs now. Story 73. At a concert for one of my favorite bands, I was caught up in the excitement, determined to capture the magic of my favorite song on video, so I could relive the moment later. As soon as the opening notes began, I lifted my phone high, making sure to get a clear shot of the stage, and started recording, fully absorbed in the performance. I sang along loudly, feeling the energy of the crowd and completely losing myself in the music. It wasn't until much later, after the song had ended, and I'd recorded what I thought was the perfect memory, that I decided to check the video. To my absolute horror, I discovered that I'd been filming the entire thing in selfie mode. Instead of capturing the band on stage, the video was a close-up of my own face, passionately singing along, and just a little off-key. When I showed the video to my friends, hoping to laugh it off, they completely lost it, nearly in tears from laughing so hard. They teased me mercilessly, imitating my intense expressions and joking about my solo performance that I'd accidentally documented. Now, whenever we go to a concert, someone always reminds me to double-check my camera or jokes about waiting for my next selfie concert. I still cringe every time I watch that video, feeling my face flush with embarrassment as I listen to my slightly off-key singing and see my exaggerated expressions. It's a memory that's far from perfect, but it's definitely one I won't forget anytime soon. Story 74. At a friend's wedding, I volunteered to give a short toast. I wanted to make it heartfelt and memorable, so I wrote out some notes. But right as I started, I got so nervous that I completely blanked and forgot everything I had prepared. I just stood there, mumbling something about love and happiness, and finally ended with, well, cheers. Everyone was really sweet about it, but I was mortified. Now, my friend jokingly calls me the world's most prepared speaker, and I avoid toasts at weddings whenever possible. Story 75. I was in line at the grocery store, deep in thought about my weekend plans, when I absent-mindedly grabbed the cart in front of me and started pushing it. The woman who owned the cart turned around, completely confused, and just stared at me as I realized my mistake. I quickly apologized, but she had this bewildered look on her face, and the people in line were trying not to laugh. I was so embarrassed that I spent the rest of the time avoiding eye contact and hoping she wouldn't end up in my checkout line. Story 76. One evening during a lively family game of Pictionary, I was feeling unusually confident about my drawing skills. When I picked the card and saw the word turtle, I thought, easy, I'll nail this. With excitement, I set to work on what I imagined would be a masterpiece. I started with a rounded shell, added little legs, and even included a cheerful smile to make it look friendly. In my mind, it looked exactly like a turtle, and I waited proudly for someone to shout out the answer. But instead, my family stared at the drawing, looking more confused with each passing second. They began guessing wildly. Potato? Cloud with legs? Alien rock? I could feel my confidence deflating as they rattled off everything but turtle. Finally, I had to give up and reveal what it was supposed to be. When I said turtle, there was a beat of silence before the whole family erupted in laughter. They pointed out that my turtle looked more like a mutant alien than anything that had ever lived in a pond. My masterpiece quickly became the joke of the night, and from then on, I was dubbed Turtle Picasso. Now, every time we play Pictionary, someone will inevitably ask if I need a warm-up round to get my drawing skills up to par, or they'll make jokes about looking forward to my next abstract animal creation. I've learned to laugh along, but let's just say I stick to simpler shapes now. Story 77. At a networking event, I was trying to be as professional as possible. I went up to a small group, introduced myself, and shook hands, only to accidentally knock over someone's glass of red wine. It spilled all over the table and splashed onto my shirt. I was so embarrassed, I quickly tried to help clean up, but the person I spilled on was just laughing, saying it was the most memorable introduction they'd had. I spent the rest of the night in a stained shirt, feeling like the clumsiest person in the room. Now I'm extra careful with drinks at any networking event. Story 78. I was at a coffee shop trying to finish up some work, and I was totally focused on my laptop. My name was called for my order, so I got up, grabbed what I thought was my coffee, and sat back down. After a couple of sips, I realized it tasted strange, and then noticed it wasn't even my drink. I'd grabbed someone else's. I looked up, and sure enough, a very confused person was standing at the counter, holding my cup and looking around. I quickly apologized and traded drinks, but I could feel everyone around me chuckling. Now, I double-check every cup to make sure it's really mine. Story 79. One time at a fair, I decided to try my luck at the ring toss game. I was super focused and convinced I'd win a prize. I gave it my best shot, but the ring flew way off course and hit someone walking by. They turned around, startled, while I just stood there, mortified, and tried to apologize. They laughed it off, saying it was the best carnival prize they'd ever gotten. My friends haven't let me live it down, and now they call me the wild thrower every time we go to a fair. Story 80. During a hike with friends, we came across a scenic lookout point. I wanted to get a photo of myself looking thoughtful with the view, so I climbed up on a rock and tried to pose. Just as I was setting up, I lost my balance, slipped off the rock, and ended up on the ground in front of everyone. My friends captured the whole thing, and now I have a very graceful photo of me mid-fall with the beautiful view in the background. Needless to say, my friends keep that photo as their favorite hiking memory. Story 81. At a family gathering, my uncle dared me to try the spiciest hot sauce they had on the table. Not wanting to look weak, I put a huge dab of it on my chip and took a bite. Within seconds, my mouth was on fire. I tried to play it cool, but tears were streaming down my face, and my whole family was watching, laughing hysterically. My mom handed me a glass of milk, but I accidentally spilled it, making the situation even worse. For the rest of the evening, I kept getting questions like, "Want another round with the hot sauce?" Now, every time I'm at a family event, someone always brings up my spicy adventure, and I politely decline any dares. Story 82. I was at a work conference and wanted to look extra professional, so I wore a new suit and fancy shoes. However, the shoes were a bit tight, but I figured I could handle it. Halfway through the day, I realized my feet were killing me, and I could barely walk without wincing. To make matters worse, I had to give a presentation and ended up hobbling to the podium. People noticed and asked if I was okay, but I tried to laugh it off. By the end of the day, I had to slip my shoes off under the table during a panel discussion. My colleagues noticed and teased me about my dedication to style over comfort. Now, I bring backup shoes for any formal event. Story 83. Once, while visiting a new town, I went to a cute little bookstore that also sold coffee. I ordered a latte, and while waiting, saw a cool-looking journal on the shelf. I picked it up, flipping through it absent-mindedly, only to realize the shop owner was watching me with a curious look. Turns out, I had somehow zoned out and started reading the journal out loud. The owner smiled and said, "It must be a good read." I quickly put it back and laughed it off, but I left the store feeling incredibly embarrassed. Now, whenever I'm in a bookstore, I keep my reading strictly internal. Edit. Yes, I did end up buying the journal. And no, I didn't continue reading out loud at home. Story 84. At a friend's birthday party, they had one of those inflatable bouncy castles, even though we're all adults. Of course, we couldn't resist, so I joined in. I got a bit too competitive, trying to do a backflip to impress everyone. Instead, I landed on my stomach with a loud "oof" sound, and everyone doubled over laughing. I tried to laugh it off, but I was sore for the rest of the night. Now, every time we have a party, my friends ask if I'm planning any stunt performances for the evening. Safe to say, I stick to the ground now. Story 85. During a cooking class I took with some friends, we were assigned to make our own pizzas. I wanted to get creative, so I loaded mine up with toppings and proudly popped it in the oven. When it was finally done, I took it out, but it was so heavy with toppings that the entire pizza slid right off the tray and splattered on the floor. My friends couldn't stop laughing as I stood there, holding an empty tray, looking at my masterpiece on the ground. The instructor kindly helped me clean up and even offered me a second round, but I stuck with a simple margherita after that. Now, every time we go out for pizza, my friends joke about my topping overload. Story 86. I was at a charity fundraiser, and they had a silent auction with some fancy items. I saw a beautiful watch and decided to place a bid, feeling pretty excited. However, when they announced the winners later, I found out I'd misunderstood the bidding instructions and had accidentally bid on a set of ceramic bowls instead. Everyone thought it was hilarious when I tried to explain, and I ended up taking home the bowls. My friends still tease me about my luxury auction win, and the bowls are now proudly displayed in my kitchen as a reminder to double-check everything. Edit. Turns out, the bowls are actually pretty nice, but I'm still saving up for a watch. Story 87. One time, I was at a department store and saw a mannequin dressed in a really stylish coat. I was so impressed, I walked up to touch it, only to realize it wasn't a mannequin, but an actual person standing very still. She looked at me, a little startled, and I just blurted out, "Nice coat!" before walking away as fast as I could. I could hear some people chuckling nearby, which made it even worse. Now I always double-check before touching any mannequin in stores, just to be safe. Story 88. At my cousin's wedding, they had a gorgeous multi-tier cake set up. As I walked by, I thought it'd be fun to pretend to take a tiny sample with my finger for a joke. My hand slipped, and I accidentally poked right through one of the lower layers. Horrified, I tried to smooth it out, but it only made it look worse. The wedding planner saw the whole thing and gave me a disapproving look, and I spent the rest of the night trying to avoid the cake table. To this day, my family calls me the cake bandit, and I'm banned from getting too close to wedding cakes. Story 89. I went to a painting class with a friend, hoping to relax and create some art. When the instructor told us to start with a light color, I somehow grabbed the black paint by mistake. Halfway through the class, I realized my sky was a deep, dark color, while everyone else's looked light and sunny. The instructor came by, gave me a confused look, and said, "Interesting choice for a sky." My friend and I couldn't stop laughing, and now that night sky painting is proudly hanging in my living room as a reminder of my artistic talent. Edit. And yes, people still ask me why my daytime landscape looks like a scene from midnight. Story 90. At an outdoor concert, I decided to be extra prepared and brought a huge umbrella in case it rained. Just as the concert started, a gust of wind came through, and my umbrella flew right out of my hands and into the crowd in front of me. I watched in horror as people ducked and tried to catch it, and eventually, a security guard retrieved it and brought it back with a smile. For the rest of the night, I was umbrella guy, and people kept giving me playful warnings to hold on tight. Now, I leave the big umbrella at home and stick with a rain jacket. Story 91. Once I decided to join a local running group to stay active. At my first meetup, I was so nervous that I forgot to bring my water bottle, figuring I'd just hydrate afterward. About halfway through the run, I started feeling parched, but I didn't want to seem unprepared, so I kept pushing. Finally, as we reached the water fountain, I practically lunged for it, only to end up splashing water all over myself in the process. My new running buddies were trying not to laugh, but I looked like I'd run through a sprinkler. For the rest of the run, everyone kept asking if I was hydrated enough, and it became a running joke. Now I bring 2 water bottles to every meetup, just in case. Story 92. At a friend's birthday dinner, we were all supposed to give a toast, and I wanted mine to be funny. I planned a joke about how we'd all be old and gray one day, but still having dinners together. Just as I was about to deliver the punchline, I got so caught up in the moment that I accidentally clinked my glass a bit too hard, and it shattered right in my hand. The whole table gasped, and I was left standing there with pieces of glass, too shocked to finish my toast. The waitstaff rushed over to help, and my friends couldn't stop laughing. Every time we go out to dinner now, they ask if I'm going to break the ice again. Story 93. At a costume party, I decided to go as a pirate, complete with a plastic sword and an eye patch. I thought I looked pretty cool, until I realized the eye patch was messing with my depth perception. Right as I was talking to someone, I went to lean against the wall, but totally missed and stumbled forward, nearly falling into them. They gave me a confused look, and I quickly tried to play it off as acting in character. Everyone got a kick out of it, and for the rest of the night, people kept coming up and calling me the clumsy pirate. Now, I'm sticking to costumes that don't impair my vision. Edit. Turns out I'm not the only one who's tried an eye patch and regretted it. Thanks for the solidarity in the comments. Story 94. During a visit to a petting zoo, I decided to befriend a llama that seemed friendly. I leaned in to give it a gentle pat, But I must have done something it didn't like, because the next thing I knew, it spit right in my face. The kids around me burst out laughing, and even some of the parents were chuckling. I stood there trying to wipe my face with whatever I had, while the llama just stared at me, looking pleased with itself. For the rest of the day, everyone in my group kept calling me Llama Whisperer. Now, whenever someone mentions a petting zoo, I politely decline the invitation. Story 95. At a work picnic, they set up a three-legged race, and my boss asked if I wanted to team up. Not wanting to turn down the bonding opportunity, I agreed. We tied our legs together, and as soon as we started, I tripped, sending both of us tumbling to the ground. My boss laughed it off, but everyone else was in hysterics. We tried to keep going, but our rhythm was completely off, and we kept tripping over each other. By the end, we were last place and covered in grass stains. Every time there's a company event now, someone suggests we give the three-legged race another try. Story 96. I was at a fancy restaurant with some friends, and we were each trying out different dishes. One of them ordered escargot, and feeling adventurous, I decided to try it. I thought it would look cool if I ate it in one bite, but the texture caught me off guard, and I ended up spitting it out right onto my plate. My friends looked horrified at first, then burst out laughing when they realized what happened. Now, every time someone mentions escargot, they remind me of my gourmet adventure gone wrong. Safe to say, I'm sticking to less exotic food choices from now on. Edit. Apparently, I'm not alone in the first time escargot fail club. Thanks for sharing your stories. Story 97. At a weekend flea market, I saw this vintage mirror and thought it would look perfect in my apartment. I decided to inspect it, turning it around to check for any scratches. In my enthusiasm, I didn't notice someone standing right behind me, and I accidentally whacked them with the mirror as I turned. They gave me a startled look, and I quickly apologized, but I could tell they were a little irritated. Needless to say, I left the market without the mirror and with a big dose of embarrassment. Now I make sure to check my surroundings before picking up anything big. Story 98. One winter, I went ice skating with some friends, even though I'd only skated a couple of times before. I was doing all right, slowly getting the hang of it, when I decided to try a little spin like I'd seen others do. I lost control and ended up sliding into a group of people nearby, causing a mini pileup. Everyone was okay, but I couldn't stop apologizing as I helped them up. My friends had a field day with it and now call me the human Zamboni. I've since decided that ice skating might not be my calling. Story 99. I was at a holiday potluck and thought it'd be fun to bring my famous mac and cheese. I spent hours making it, using extra cheese for maximum gooiness. But when it came time to serve, I realized I'd forgotten to add salt. It was bland as could be. I tried adding salt on top, but it just wasn't the same, and everyone could tell something was off. My friends politely ate it, but I knew they were being nice. Now, whenever there's a potluck, people joke about me bringing my special recipe and ask if I remembered the salt. Edit. Yes, I triple-check my recipes now. And yes, my mac and cheese is back to being delicious. Story 100. At a game night with friends, we were playing Jenga, and the tower was getting ridiculously tall. It was my turn, and everyone was watching as I carefully pulled out the piece from the middle. I thought I had it under control, but the whole thing suddenly came crashing down. The blocks scattered everywhere, and I just sat there in disbelief while my friends roared with laughter. From then on, they called me the Jenga Destroyer, and joked that I bring chaos wherever I go. Every game night since, they make me sit as far away from the tower as possible. Story 101. I once went on a zip-lining adventure with a group of friends, and I was super excited to try it out. As I was getting harnessed up, the guide gave us all a little safety briefing. But I must have zoned out because when it was my turn, I didn't realize I had to keep my legs straight. So, as soon as I launched off the platform, I ended up spinning in circles all the way down. By the time I reached the end, I was completely dizzy and had to be helped off the line. My friends had recorded the whole thing and kept replaying it, laughing at my twist technique. Now, whenever someone brings up ziplining, they joke that I have my own special style. Story 102. At a friend's baby shower, they organized a diaper-changing race with baby dolls. I wanted to impress everyone with my skills, so I was super focused. Right as I was finishing up, I realized I'd put the diaper on backward. Everyone noticed, and they all started laughing as I tried to fix it quickly, but I fumbled and ended up dropping the doll. I just stood there, embarrassed, while they all cheered for my unique approach. From then on, my friends teased me, saying I'd be the backward diaper expert. I definitely won't be signing up for any diaper races anytime soon. Story 103. During a team-building event, we had a scavenger hunt, and I got paired with my manager. We were doing pretty well until one clue required us to find a feather. I spotted one nearby and, in my excitement, bent down to grab it without looking around. I accidentally stepped into a small puddle, splashing water onto my manager's shoes. She tried to laugh it off, but I could tell she wasn't thrilled. I spent the rest of the hunt walking as carefully as possible. Now whenever we have team events, she jokingly reminds me to watch my step. I've definitely learned to look around before diving for clues. Edit. Yes, she still brings it up in meetings, and yes, I always check for puddles now. Story 104. At the holiday cookie swap, I decided to get fancy and make peppermint bark cookies. I spent hours decorating them perfectly, with little peppermint pieces on top. When I finally brought them to the party, everyone was impressed with how they looked. But when they bit into them, I realized I'd gone way too heavy on the peppermint. The cookies were so strong that a few people actually coughed, and one friend jokingly asked if I was trying to freshen everyone's breath. Now, whenever we have a dessert swap, people ask if I'm bringing my peppermint blast cookies. Lesson learned. A little peppermint goes a long way. Story 105. One winter, I was trying to show off my snowboarding skills at a ski resort. I went down a hill that was way too advanced for me, thinking I'd look cool. Halfway down, I lost control, rolled into a snowbank, and ended up covered in snow with only my goggles peeking out. People passing by on the lift above were laughing and pointing, and my friends had to help dig me out because I was stuck. They still tease me about it every winter, calling me the snowbank surfer. Now I stick to beginner slopes to avoid any more epic wipeouts. Story 106. At a family potluck, I was in charge of bringing a salad. I figured it'd be easy, so I bought a pre-made mix and added a bunch of extra toppings. But when we sat down to eat, my aunt took one bite and gave me a confused look. I realized I'd forgotten to take the little dressing packet out of the bag before mixing everything, so there were bits of plastic scattered throughout. I quickly removed the bowl, but the whole family was laughing about my special recipe. Ever since, they've called me the salad chef, and they always ask if I've remembered to leave the plastic out. Edit. Yes, I've since upgraded my salad-making skills. No plastic involved. Story 107. I went to a pottery class with some friends, feeling pretty confident that I'd be able to make something nice. I tried to make a simple bowl, but halfway through, I pressed too hard, and the whole thing collapsed in on itself, turning into an unrecognizable blob. The instructor gave me a sympathetic smile and suggested I embrace the abstract. My friends were trying not to laugh as I attempted to salvage it. Now I have a misshapen bowl that they jokingly call modern art. It sits on my shelf as a reminder of my pottery skills, or lack thereof. Story 108. At a beach bonfire, my friends and I were roasting marshmallows, and I was determined to make the perfect golden brown one. Just as I was about to pull it off the stick, I accidentally flicked it right onto my friend's arm. She yelped, and the marshmallow stuck to her, leaving a gooey mess. I apologized about 100 times, and we both ended up laughing, but she jokingly warned me to keep my marshmallows to myself for the rest of the night. Now, every bonfire, someone asks if I'm bringing sticky snacks or just sticking to s'mores. Story 109. One day at a cafe, I was sipping my coffee while reading a book, completely absorbed. When my friend arrived, I stood up to say hi, only to realize I'd somehow spilled coffee on my shirt without noticing. My friend looked at me, trying not to laugh, and said, "Is that a new fashion trend?" I tried to play it off, but I spent the rest of our time there with a coffee stain on my shirt, feeling a bit self-conscious. Now, every time we meet for coffee, my friend jokes about bringing a bib for me. I always double-check my cup before standing up now. Edit. Yes, I now have a trusty stain remover pen in my bag at all times. Lesson learned. Story 1 and 10. I was helping a friend move, and as we were lifting her sofa, I thought I'd try to be helpful and grab it from the bottom for extra support. Unfortunately, I didn't realize there was an old can of soda wedged underneath. As soon as I lifted, the can exploded, spraying soda everywhere, including all over me. My friend looked at me, stunned, and then burst out laughing as I stood there, sticky and covered in soda. For the rest of the move, she kept handing me safer items to carry, like pillows and blankets. Now, anytime we move something, she asks if I've checked for surprises first. Story 111. I went to a friend's barbecue and decided to bring my famous potato salad. I wanted to impress everyone, so I made a huge batch and added extra onions for flavor. When people started digging in, I noticed a lot of them were quietly pushing it to the side. Eventually, one brave friend asked if I'd accidentally doubled the onions. Apparently, I'd made it so onion-heavy that it was practically inedible. I had to laugh it off, but it was embarrassing seeing so much of it left untouched. For the rest of the barbecue, people joked about my signature onion salad, and now I'm much more careful about my ingredients when bringing food to a party. Story 112. At a karaoke bar with some friends, I decided to sing my favorite song and went all out with a big, dramatic opening. Halfway through, I tried a high note, but my voice cracked in the worst way possible. The room went silent for a second before everyone burst out laughing, and I just stood there, mortified. I finished the song, but by then my confidence was completely shot. Afterward, my friends kept telling me they loved my unique interpretation, and they still tease me about that high note every time we go to karaoke. Story 113. One day at the office, I was running late and barely had time to grab breakfast, so I brought a bag of cereal to snack on at my desk. I was chatting with a coworker when I accidentally knocked the bag over, sending cereal flying all over my desk and onto the floor. Everyone around me stopped and just stared as I tried to pick up the pieces, and my coworker couldn't stop laughing at my breakfast explosion. For the rest of the day, people kept asking if I'd had enough cereal or if I needed help with my morning cleanup. Now, I'm extra careful with snacks at my desk. Edit. And yes, I now use a sealed container for any desk snacks. Lesson learned the crunchy way. Story 114. At a theme park, I thought I'd be brave and go on a massive roller coaster. I was feeling good until we got to the top of the first drop, and suddenly my courage vanished. I ended up screaming louder than I ever have in my life, and to make it worse, they snapped a photo at that exact moment. My face looked like pure terror, and when I saw the picture later, I was horrified, but also couldn't stop laughing. My friends, of course, bought the photo and still send it to me whenever I mention going to an amusement park. They've dubbed it my roller coaster face, and it's a permanent part of our group chat now. Story 115. Once, at a wedding reception, they had a dance-off competition, and my friends dared me to join. I thought it'd be fun to show off my moves, but I got a little too excited and ended up slipping right in the middle of a big spin. I hit the floor, and the crowd let out a collective, "Ooh!" before laughing and clapping. I got up, tried to laugh it off, and did a quick bow, but I was definitely embarrassed. For the rest of the night, people kept giving me thumbs up and telling me I nailed it. Now, every wedding I go to, my friends ask if I'm going to show off my famous moves again. Story 116. I was grocery shopping and in a rush, so I quickly grabbed a shopping cart without looking. As I started to push it down the aisle, I noticed it felt heavier than usual. That's when I looked down and realized there was already someone's stuff in it. Another shopper had left their cart unattended for a second. Just as I was about to turn around and put it back, the owner of the cart came up, looking a little confused. I tried to laugh it off and apologized, but the shopper just shook their head with a smile. Now I always double-check my cart before heading down an aisle. Edit. To everyone sharing their wrong cart stories, glad I'm not alone. Seems like we've all been there at least once. Story 117. One time I was out jogging in the neighborhood, trying to stay fit. As I passed by a house with a little picket fence, a small dog suddenly ran up, barking like crazy. Startled, I tried to pick up my pace, but I ended up tripping over my own feet and fell right in front of the fence. The dog's owner was watching the whole thing from the porch and came over, trying not to laugh as they asked if I was okay. I got up, brushed myself off, and managed to laugh along, but I felt so awkward. Now, every time I jog past that house, I give it a wide berth just to avoid another dog encounter. Story 118. At a company Christmas party, they had a mistletoe hung by the entrance as a fun little decoration. I didn't notice it though, and walked in right behind a coworker. Someone pointed it out, and suddenly people were chanting, encouraging us to do a little mistletoe kiss. My coworker and I looked at each other, awkwardly laughed, and gave a quick hug instead. It was harmless, but I was blushing for the next hour. After that, every holiday event, someone reminds me of the mistletoe incident and jokes about holiday traditions. Now, I always check for mistletoe before walking into any room. Story 119. I went to a friend's housewarming party, and they had a bunch of cool decorations, including a huge centerpiece on the coffee table. While talking to someone, I accidentally leaned on the table and knocked the whole thing over. The centerpiece toppled, sending glass beads and decorative stones all over the floor. My friend laughed and helped me clean up, but I felt pretty embarrassed. Now, whenever I'm at a party, I make sure to stay far away from anything breakable, just in case. Edit. And yes, my friend still teases me about being too strong for their decorations. Story 120. At a family reunion, we decided to take a big group photo with everyone squeezed together. I thought it'd be funny to make a silly face in the background, figuring no one would notice. Unfortunately, my cousin decided to blow up the picture and frame it for everyone. Now, my goofy expression is on full display in every relative's home, and it's become a running joke. Every time I see that picture, I cringe a little. Now I stick to smiling in group photos, just to be safe. Story 121. At a dinner with some colleagues, I was trying to impress everyone by ordering a fancy dish I'd never tried before: lobster. When it arrived, I quickly realized I had no idea how to eat it. I tried to fake my way through, but as I was cracking the shell, a piece of lobster flew off my plate and landed on my boss's lap. He looked down, surprised, while everyone else tried to hold back laughter. I awkwardly apologized and tried to retrieve it without making things worse. For the rest of the night, people kept glancing over at me, smirking, and asking if I'd mastered the art of lobster. Now, every time there's seafood on the menu, my colleagues make sure to remind me of my first lobster experience. Story 122. I was at a friend's baby shower, and they had a game where we had to guess how many jelly beans were in a big jar. I decided to make a random, confident guess, jokingly saying 1,237. The host announced the actual count was only 350, and everyone laughed at how far off I was. For the rest of the party, people kept joking that I saw the future with my wild guess, and started asking for predictions about other random things. Now, every baby shower or event with a guessing game, my friends insist I make the first guess, just to see how wildly off I'll be. Story 123. At a music festival, I was dancing with my friends when I got really into the beat. I decided to attempt a fancy spin, but my foot slipped on the grass, and I ended up falling backward into a mud puddle. My friends were laughing so hard they could barely help me up, and I was covered in mud from head to toe. I tried to keep dancing, but it was hard to look cool while looking like I just wrestled with a swamp. For the rest of the festival, people kept giving me thumbs up and saying I had the best dance moves. Now I'm a little more cautious with my spins at outdoor events. Edit. Yep, I did have to ride home covered in mud, and yes, my car needed a serious cleaning afterward. Story 124. At a formal family dinner, I was seated next to my grandmother, who has a very particular way of eating. I was doing my best to match her manners, but when the soup was served, I somehow managed to tip the entire bowl over while reaching for the bread. The soup splashed onto the table and even onto her nice dress. My grandma gave me a polite smile, but I could tell she was less than pleased. The whole family tried not to laugh, but it was obvious everyone was struggling to keep a straight face. Since then, my family jokes that I should have my own soup-proof setup at family dinners. I now steer clear of soup at formal events. Story 125. One fall, I went apple picking with some friends, and we decided to get a little competitive about who could reach the highest apples. I found a perfect-looking apple way up, so I climbed up onto a branch to reach it. Just as I grabbed the apple, the branch snapped, and I tumbled right into a pile of leaves below. My friends couldn't stop laughing as I sat there, covered in leaves, holding the apple triumphantly. Now every fall, they ask if I want to take my chances with apple picking again. I've learned to stick to the lower branches ever since. Story 126. At a friend's wedding, they had a fancy buffet with all kinds of food, and I decided to load up my plate. I was holding my plate and drink, trying to balance everything, when I tripped over the edge of the tablecloth. I managed to catch myself, but my drink spilled all over the food on my plate, soaking everything. The people nearby gasped, and I could feel my face turn red as I tried to salvage my meal. For the rest of the evening, people kept asking if I'd like a dry plate this time. Now, I always hold my drink separately at buffets. Edit. And yes, I left a tip for the cleanup crew. They definitely deserved it after that one. Story 127. During a Halloween party, I dressed as a vampire with dramatic fake fangs and dark makeup. I thought I looked awesome, until I went to take a bite of pizza, and one of my fangs popped off right into my food. My friends saw the whole thing and burst out laughing, saying, "Guess the vampire's got a toothache." I tried to put the fang back in, but it wouldn't stick, so I ended up looking like a very odd, one-fanged vampire for the rest of the night. Now, every Halloween, my friends ask if I'm bringing my famous single-fang look back. I might switch to a different costume next time. Story 128. I went ice skating with a date, even though I'd only been on the ice a couple of times before. I was trying to impress them by acting confident, but right as I was skating over to them, I lost my balance and fell flat on my back. They looked at me, trying not to laugh, and asked if I was okay. I was too embarrassed to get up right away and just stayed there for a second, pretending to be taking in the view. For the rest of the date, they teased me about my graceful skating skills. I might need a few lessons before my next skating adventure. Story 129. Once, while waiting for a bus, I got really into reading a book. I noticed out of the corner of my eye that a bus had pulled up, so I quickly got up and boarded. After a few stops, I looked up and realized I was on the wrong bus, heading in the completely opposite direction. I had to awkwardly explain to the driver that I'd gotten on by mistake and needed to get off at the next stop. Every time I ride the bus now, I double-check the route before hopping on. My friends still laugh about my mystery tour around the city. Edit. Thanks for all the similar bus stories in the comments. It's good to know I'm not the only one who's ended up on an unexpected adventure. Story 130. At a community bake sale, I decided to make cupcakes and spent hours decorating them with fancy icing swirls. When I arrived, everyone was admiring my cupcakes, and I felt proud, until a gust of wind came through and knocked over the whole tray. All my hard work ended up on the ground, and people nearby gasped as I stood there in shock. Some folks helped me pick up the mess, but I was too embarrassed to stick around. Now every bake sale, someone jokingly asks if I've secured my cupcakes. I'm sticking to sturdier desserts from now on. Story 131. I was at a friend's birthday dinner, and they brought out a huge cake with sparklers on top. Everyone gathered around to take photos, and I was standing right behind the birthday girl, holding my phone up for the perfect shot. Suddenly, one of the sparklers started sparking a bit too close to me, and I jumped back, accidentally bumping into another friend and knocking over a drink. The drink spilled across the table, and everyone paused for a moment before laughing at my panicked reaction. The birthday girl still teases me, calling me her personal fireworks show. Now, I try to keep a safe distance from sparklers and candles at any event. Story 132. One summer, I went paddleboarding with some friends. I was feeling confident and even tried to show off by balancing on one foot. Naturally, I lost my balance and tumbled right into the water, flipping the paddleboard in the process. My friends were laughing so hard they could barely keep their own balance as I struggled to climb back on, soaking wet and totally embarrassed. They still remind me about my elegant dismount every time we're near water. Now, I stick to basic moves and save the tricks for the pros. Story 133. I attended a trivia night with some friends, feeling pretty pumped to show off my knowledge. During one round, I was so sure of my answer that I shouted it out confidently, only to realize I'd completely misunderstood the question. The whole room turned to look at me, and my friends burst out laughing. Our team didn't even get close to winning, but my special answer became the highlight of the night. Now, every trivia night, my friends ask if I have any unique answers to share. I've learned to think before I speak, but they still tease me about it. Edit. Thanks for all the comments about your own trivia fails. It's good to know I'm not alone in the overconfident answers club. Story 134. At a rooftop bar with a group of friends, I was leaning on the railing, enjoying the view and chatting. As I went to take a sip of my drink, a gust of wind caught my hat, and it flew right off my head and over the side of the building. I watched in horror as it drifted down, completely out of reach. My friends tried not to laugh, but they couldn't help it, and I had to spend the rest of the night hatless, with everyone joking about my flying accessory. Now, whenever I wear a hat, my friends warn me to hold on tight, in case it decides to take flight again. Story 135. I went to a community pottery painting event and picked out a nice mug to decorate. I spent ages painting it with delicate designs, feeling like a real artist. When it was time to put it in the kiln for firing, I somehow tripped on the edge of the table and dropped it. My beautiful mug shattered right there in front of everyone, and I just stood there, heartbroken, as the other attendees tried to console me. Since then, my friends have dubbed me the Mug Destroyer. And now every time we do something artsy, they keep an eye on me, just in case. Story 136. At a family picnic, I thought it would be fun to fly a kite with my little cousins. The wind was perfect, and the kite went up really high. Just as I was starting to feel like a pro, a sudden gust yanked the kite right out of my hands, sending it flying away. My cousins looked at me, shocked, as the kite disappeared into the distance. We all ran after it, but there was no catching it. I ended up having to buy them a new one later. Now every picnic, my family jokes about me being the kite liberator. I'm a little more cautious with windy days and kites now. Edit. I've definitely invested in sturdier kite handles since that day. Thanks for the suggestions, everyone. Story 137. One winter, I decided to try snowshoeing with a group of friends. I was excited to explore the snowy trails, but halfway through, I tripped over my own snowshoes and ended up face first in a snowbank. My friends had to help pull me out, laughing the whole time. I spent the rest of the hike covered in snow, looking like a walking snowman, while everyone else seemed to glide along effortlessly. Now, every time we go on a winter adventure, my friends ask if I'm prepared for a face-off with the snow. I make sure to practice walking in snowshoes before I hit the trails these days. Story 138. At a restaurant with some co-workers, I thought I'd impress everyone by ordering in a language I'd been learning. When the waiter came, I confidently placed my order, only for him to give me a blank look. He politely asked if I could repeat it in English, as I'd accidentally combined words from two different languages. My co-worker started laughing, and I quickly realized I was far from fluent. Now, whenever we go out, someone always asks if I'll be ordering in my unique dialect. I've since learned to brush up on my phrases before trying them out in public. Story 139. During a long road trip, I was in charge of navigating, and I prided myself on having a great sense of direction. I told everyone confidently that I knew a shortcut, so we took a different exit. An hour later, we were completely lost in the middle of nowhere, with no cell signal to guide us back. My friends spent the rest of the trip teasing me about my legendary shortcut. Now every time we go on a road trip, they insist on double-checking my directions. I've accepted my role as the creative navigator of the group. Edit. Yes, we eventually found our way back, And yes, I now stick to the main roads on trips. Story 140. At a holiday potluck, I volunteered to bring a homemade casserole. I spent hours on it, wanting it to be perfect. When it was time to serve, I proudly placed it on the table, only to realize I'd forgotten to add one major ingredient: cheese. I tried to play it cool, but my friends noticed immediately, and they teased me about my experimental casserole. They were kind enough to eat it, but I could tell it wasn't the hit I'd hoped for. Now, whenever I bring food, everyone asks if it's missing anything. I make sure to double-check the recipe from start to finish. Story 141. I was at an outdoor yoga class, feeling all zen and relaxed, when I decided to try a challenging balance pose. Just as I was starting to feel stable, a bee decided to pay me a visit. I panicked, lost my balance, and toppled over, taking my mat with me. To make matters worse, I accidentally knocked over the water bottle of the person next to me, soaking both our mats. Everyone around was trying not to laugh, but I could tell they were amused by my graceful fall. Now, every time I go to yoga, my friends jokingly ask if I've checked for bees. I'm a bit more cautious with outdoor classes now. Story 142. At a family gathering, we decided to play a game of charades. When it was my turn, I got chicken, and thought I could pull off a hilarious impression. I started flapping my arms and clucking, but instead of chicken, my family started guessing things like crazy bird and flailing penguin. I tried harder to act like a chicken, but they just kept laughing, unable to guess it correctly. By the end, I was exhausted and just blurted out, "It was a chicken!" Now, every game night, someone always insists that I do my famous chicken impression. I stick to simpler clues these days. Story 143. One day at the gym, I decided to try lifting weights to impress a friend. I grabbed what I thought was a reasonable amount, but as soon as I started lifting, I realized it was way too heavy. I tried to play it cool, but I could barely manage, and eventually, the weight slipped from my hands and hit the floor with a loud crash. Everyone turned to look, and my friend was laughing so hard he had to sit down. Since then, he calls me the Hulk, and teases me every time we work out together. I've learned to start with lighter weights to avoid another powerlifting fail. Edit. Thanks for the support in the comments, and yes, I'm taking my time building up to the heavier weights. Story 144. At a friend's wedding reception, they had a beautiful display of desserts, including a tower of cupcakes. I went up to grab one, but as I pulled it from the stack, the tower started to wobble. I tried to steady it, but I ended up knocking half the cupcakes onto the table. I froze, horrified, while people around me gasped. Thankfully, my friends helped clean up, but I was absolutely mortified. Now, every wedding we attend, my friends jokingly tell me to steer clear of the dessert table. I'm very cautious with food displays after that experience. Story 145. During a game of miniature golf, I decided to get a little creative with my shot. I lined up, gave it a big swing, and accidentally sent the ball flying way off the course. It hit a nearby fence and bounced back, nearly hitting one of my friends. We all burst out laughing, but the course attendant wasn't too pleased. I had to apologize and promise to stick to gentle swings for the rest of the game. Now, whenever we play mini-golf, my friends call me the power swing. I've definitely refined my technique since then. Story 146. I once went to a painting class with a friend, and we were each working on our own canvas. I got so absorbed in the painting that I accidentally dipped my brush into my water cup instead of my paint, then proceeded to splash water all over my canvas, creating an unplanned, abstract effect. My friend couldn't stop laughing, and even the instructor tried to hide a smile as they came over to see what I was doing. Ever since then, my friends joke about my unique water painting technique. Now, I make sure to keep my water and paint separate at all times. Edit. I actually kept the abstract painting, and it's now hanging on my wall as a reminder of my creative oops. Story 147. At a summer barbecue, I volunteered to be in charge of grilling. I was flipping burgers and trying to look like a pro when I accidentally knocked a burger off the grill and straight onto the ground. Everyone turned to look, and I just froze for a second before picking it up, embarrassed. My friends laughed and teased me, asking if I was adding extra seasoning to the burgers. Now, every barbecue, someone reminds me to watch out for gravity. I've since perfected my grilling skills, but they won't let me forget that moment. Story 148. I was at a beach party, and they had a volleyball game going on. I joined in, trying to act like I knew what I was doing, even though I hadn't played in years. When the ball came my way, I went for a big spike but completely missed, tripping over my own feet and landing in the sand. Everyone burst out laughing, and I was left lying in the sand, trying to play it off like it was no big deal. Now, every time we play beach volleyball, my friends ask if I'm going to show off my famous spike. I've accepted that volleyball might not be my sport. Story 149. During a friend's bridal shower, they had a game where we had to race to unwrap a prize wrapped in layers of plastic wrap and tape. I was so determined to win that I was tearing at it with all my might. Just as I finally got to the last layer, the prize, a small bottle of wine, slipped out and rolled across the room. I scrambled to grab it, but someone else beat me to it. Everyone laughed as I stood there, empty-handed after all that effort. Now, every party they ask if I'll unwrap the gifts. I've learned to be a little more patient with wrapping games. Edit. And yes, they let me keep a consolation prize after that fiasco. A small candle. Story 150. I was at a work conference, and they had a networking activity where we had to introduce ourselves in a unique way. I decided to make a joke saying, "Hi, I'm the person who always spills coffee." I thought it'd be funny, but halfway through the event, I actually did spill my coffee on the table. Everyone around me laughed, saying I'd predicted my own fate, and I was left cleaning up the mess with a red face. Now, at every work event, people give me a little extra space when I'm holding a drink. My coffee spill prediction has become a running joke among my co-workers. Story 151. I was at a community marathon, determined to complete the whole course. Halfway through, I reached a water station and decided to grab a cup without stopping, just like the pros do. But as I reached for the cup, I misjudged the timing, and water splashed all over my face instead of my mouth. People around me chuckled as I sputtered and kept running, dripping water down my shirt. I looked like I'd just dunked my head in a bucket. By the end of the marathon, my friends had all heard about my hydration fail. Now, every race we do together, they remind me to take it easy on the water. Story 152. At a fancy restaurant for a birthday dinner, I ordered spaghetti and was trying to eat it as neatly as possible. Just as I twirled a big forkful, one noodle somehow flew out, flicking red sauce onto the pristine white tablecloth and my friend's shirt. My friend looked at me, shocked, while I frantically tried to dab at the stain with my napkin. The waiter brought over some extra napkins, clearly trying to hide a smile. Now, every time we go out, my friends ask if I'll be careful with the spaghetti. I'm sticking to less messy dishes for the time being. Story 153. At an office potluck, I brought a platter of deviled eggs, feeling pretty proud of my contribution. As I was setting them down, I tripped slightly, causing a few of the eggs to slide off the tray and onto the floor. I stood there in shock for a second, while my co-workers tried not to laugh. I managed to salvage most of the eggs, but my pride took a hit. For every potluck since, my co-workers have joked about me bringing ground eggs. I've gotten much more careful with balancing trays. Edit. And yes, I brought a sturdier tray to the next potluck, just to be safe. Story 154. At a friend's talent show event, I volunteered to perform a simple card trick I'd been practicing for weeks. When it was my turn, I confidently shuffled the deck, only for the cards to slip from my hands and scatter all over the floor. The audience chuckled, and I awkwardly gathered them up, trying to recover my magician composure. I went through with the trick, but the effect was kind of ruined after that initial fumble. Now, my friends refer to me as the Great Card Dropper every time they see a deck of cards. I still get teased about my magic skills. Story 155. During a hike with some friends, we found a beautiful spot overlooking the valley and decided to take some photos. I wanted to sit on a rock for a dramatic pose, but as I leaned back, I lost my balance and slid right off, landing in a pile of dirt. My friends captured the whole thing on camera, and we all burst out laughing. Needless to say, my majestic photo didn't turn out as planned. Now, every time we go hiking, someone asks if I'm planning any more photo ops. I stick to safer poses these days. Story 156. At a friend's engagement party, they had a photo booth set up with props like hats and glasses. I decided to put on a ridiculous pair of giant glasses and a sparkly bow tie, then tried to pose dramatically. Just as the camera clicked, the bow tie fell off, and my friend reached over to try and fix it, accidentally knocking my glasses off too. The final picture ended up being a chaotic snapshot of us both scrambling to grab the props. Now, every time I see that photo, I can't help but laugh at our glamorous moment. My friend and I still joke about our epic photo booth fail. Edit. And yes, that photo is now framed in their house as a classic memory from the party. Story 157. I was at an outdoor concert with some friends, and we all decided to sit on a grassy hill. Trying to get comfortable, I spread out a blanket and plopped down, not realizing that the ground was wet from earlier rain. Within seconds, my jeans were soaked, and my friends burst out laughing when they saw the giant wet spot. I had to sit there for the rest of the concert, looking like I'd had a little accident. Now, every outdoor event, my friends bring up that night and remind me to check the ground first. I definitely learned my lesson about damp grass. Story 158. At a family reunion, we decided to do a big group photo. I thought it'd be funny to crouch down in the front and do a silly face, thinking no one would notice. Unfortunately, the photographer saw it and zoomed in right on me for one of the prints. The final picture that everyone got to take home had me front and center, looking ridiculous, while the rest of the family looked dignified. Now, every time I visit a relative, I get a reminder of my photobomb moment. Safe to say, I've learned to smile normally for group photos. Story 159. One time, while bowling with friends, I decided to try a fancy spin move I'd seen on TV. I swung back, released the ball, and immediately lost my balance, stumbling forward and nearly landing face first on the lane. The ball ended up in the gutter, and my friends were howling with laughter, calling it my pro move. For the rest of the game, they kept teasing me, saying I should take it easy on the tricks. Now, every time we go bowling, they ask if I'm planning any more signature moves. I've decided to stick to the basics. Edit. And yes, that attempt at a spin move is still one of their favorite bowling memories. Story 160. At a picnic with friends, I thought I'd be fancy and bring a bottle of sparkling water. When I opened it, the bottle fizzed over and sprayed everywhere, soaking me and the picnic blanket. My friends just sat there, stunned for a second before bursting out laughing. I was left holding the bottle with a sheepish grin as everyone grabbed napkins to clean up the mess. Since then, whenever someone brings sparkling water, they always hand it to me, for old time's sake, with a grin. I make sure to open it much more carefully now,